So last class, we got a very kind of gentle introduction to philosophy, what kind of questions philosophers are interested in, what the heck they're talking about, what kind of arguments they're formulating. Instead of doing more of an overview, we're actually going to jump into one of the fields of philosophy, which concerns philosophy of mind. And it's related to the skepticism that we talked about last class, right? External world skepticism. This view that, well, what's out there outside of our own minds, how can we even know it is the way we think it is? Maybe we could be in a simulation. Maybe we could be sleeping right now. Nagel kind of tried to show us that there doesn't seem to be any proofs that we could use to determine that we're sleeping or dreaming or that we're not in a simulation. But we're going to take that skepticism and we're going to transfer it to the field of philosophy of mind today. This external world skepticism might also lead us into skepticism about other people, whether other consciousnesses exist, whether, your dear friend actually has similar experiences to you, whether they see the world in the same way that you do, and how similar that might be. Now, why might we have skepticism of consciousness? That other people have consciousness, that their consciousness works the same way that we do? Well, one reason is that we can't see into anybody else's mind, right? You are all having your own unique experience of this lecture right now, of the environment that we're in, all of these different things. So we can't see into other people's experiences. We can't see their thoughts. We can't see or experience their feelings. We only have privileged access to what's going on in our own minds, right? If the person sitting next to you is cold right now because of the air conditioning or whatever, you can't feel that, right? If you're cold, you can feel that you're cold. You can feel what your inner temperature is like. Similarly, you have access to your own beliefs, your own thoughts about things, but you can't look into anybody else's mind and see exactly what the world seems like according to their perspective. What's going on with them? How they're experiencing and feeling things. Nevertheless, we do still make conclusions and claims and act as if other people do have minds, and they do operate similarly to how we do. We kind of infer the existence of other minds by observing outward behavior. That's basically what we have to go on, right? Annabelle, who's your best friend?
Sophia.
Sophia. Do you think Sophia has a mind? Do you think it's similar to yours?
Yeah.
Why do you think that?
Because we get along well.
You get along well?
We think alike.
If you both put your hand on a stove, a hot stove, what would happen?
Both pull away.
You both pull away. If you both see some really cute animal at the pet store, what are you going to do?
Say all.
Oh! Right? It looks like you have a similar reaction to it, right? If you both have, I don't know, what's your favorite flavor of ice cream?
Cookie dough.
Cookie dough? Does she like cookie dough too? No, she likes different ice cream. Let's say you both have strawberry. Let's say you both like strawberry. You infer that she's like you. She has a mind. She has consciousness, because when you both taste that ice cream, you're like, oh, this is so sweet, right? This is so good. Oh, it hits the spot. So it seems like we infer the existence of other minds by observing people's behavior, right? How they respond to things, what they say, what they communicate to us, and all of these things. But are we justified in making this inference? In thinking that other people have minds like we do? And thinking those minds are similar to ours? Well, skepticism of other minds raises an interesting question. How do we know that other people experience the world in the same ways we do? You said a moment ago, Annabelle, that both you and your friend Sophia would pull your hand away if you both touched a hot stove, right? Why would you pull your hand away?
Responding to the
Pain. You think you'd both be experiencing pain. Do you know that? Do you know that Sophia experiences pain the same way you do?
But I know that she'll react the same way.
Okay.
So she's feeling something.
Yeah, I mean, this is a tough question, right? How do we know other people experience the world in the same ways we do? That when they, go out to Chipotle, they also think it's delicious. That they're having this, oh, this is so good experience, right? Or when we taste ice cream, that we both have an experience of sweetness. Or when we're looking at what the professor is writing on the board, that we're both seeing the color blue. Is your blue the same as my blue? What do y'all think of this question? How do you know other people experience the world in a similar way that you do? Have the same sensations and feelings and thoughts? Take 2 minutes, talk to the people around you. Because I assume that you do think this. People do see and experience the world in the same way. Why do you think that? Okay, discuss amongst your groups. Oh, this is going to be a shitty marker. What do you think? Yeah. Do you think we see and experience the world in the same way? Or in a similar way?
In a similar way, sure. I think that the processes of arriving to those feelings will be completely different, and in that way they're completely different.
Okay.
For the most part, I mean, we end at the same conclusions a lot of the time. Not exactly the same, but
It seems that way, right?
it is discomfort for most people. I mean, you can't attribute, this pain will be the same for this other person. You'll never be able to do that. But
Okay.
you can see that you reach the same conclusions.
If a Komodo dragon bit us both, do you think we both experience something similar?
Yeah.
Like a similar pain?
Yeah, but I don't
Okay.
think that we could feel the pain the exact same. Maybe you feel
Sure.
more stinging pain, I feel more tearing pain.
Sure.
I call it stinging, you call it tearing.
Well, why do you think we have similar experiences?
Because we all live together around each other, that's why I think so. If
We-
we were much farther apart, we'd have much more vast differences if we never contacted each other. Nothing
Okay.
like that.
Maybe
I mean,
maybe some of it has to do with we live in the same society
Yeah.
or culture,
Yeah,
maybe.
for sure.
educated the same way or something to think about these things, talk about these things?
Yeah, similar childhoods, I'd say. 'Cause
Okay.
behavior
Okay.
is a big explanation of a lot of things.
Yeah.
I mean, it can't explain everything, but
Yeah, seems like that informs us, right?
there's a huge correlation for sure.
Okay, what do y'all think? Raise your hand if you think we all kind of experience the world in a similar way. Okay, why do you think that? How did you answer this question when you were talking in your groups? Yeah.
Because even if like certain things or sensations, they're different in how we perceive them. As long as we react the same way, they are the same thing to us as like a shared experience. Like if someone pulls their hand away because it's hot and the other person pulls it away because it's cold, it's still the same reaction and it's still the same thing to everyone.
Okay, so it seems like you're saying we think other people experience the world in the same way we do because they have similar reactions to things. They engage in similar behavior. Is that kind of what you're saying?
Yeah.
What do the rest of y'all think? Yeah.
There's sort of ways to test when somebody sees something outside of the norm. Like colorblind tests, we can reliably check which people have the same conditions, if that makes sense. So there's something clearly different about them compared to the average person with full vision.
Okay. So what you're saying seems to imply most of us kind of have similar natures or constitutions,
And
right?
we can reliably test when somebody doesn't, which indicates that there's like a general, thing we can see.
Yeah, we use those tests to kind of determine whether or not somebody's brain is different, right, than the average population, right? Yeah, it seems like, look, we have similar biologies. We have similar constitutions, right? Similar biochemical reactions going on in our brains, similar bodies, right? You might think like we have similar sense organs as well. Look, we all have eyes. We all have ears. We all have a nose, right? We all have this sense of touch, we can feel things. And it seems like we have similar behavior. We respond to things similarly, right? Is this a good response to this question? What does Nagel say in this chapter? I'll give you a hint. There's an assumption baked into this response. What might that assumption be? Yeah?
Assumption that other people can think outside of your own mind.
Sure. Yeah. What are we basing this belief on, that other people are similar to us?
The mind.
I mean, we're using our minds, we think, to interpret this stuff, but
What you can see, like, visibly.
what we can see, right? We're watching the behavior of other people. And it seems like on the basis of that behavior, on the basis of our sense experiences, our observations, what things feel, taste, smell like, etc., based on that, we infer other people are like us. But we're assuming here that there's a correlation between our experience of life and people's and our outward behavior, right? Their experience of life and their outward behavior. We're just kind of assuming, right, that what is modeled for us on the outside, the behavior that people exhibit, is somehow indicative of what's going on the inside, right? That's an assumption. We cannot, in principle, see inside anybody else's mind. We cannot, in principle, know that this is true. We can only know that it's true in our personal case, right? That there's a correlation between what's going on in here and what is affecting us from out there, right? You know that ice cream is sweet because you experience that. You individually, uniquely, yourself. You think that ice cream is sweet to other people because you're observing their outward behavior, but you can't feel what they're feeling. You can't taste what they're tasting, right? You can't see into other people's experience the way you can see into your own. Right? When somebody smacks you, you feel pain. Right? When you taste ice cream, you taste something sweet. When you put your hand on a hot stove, you feel pain, it feels hot, right? You know that because you experience it yourself, right? You can feel it, you can sense it. But even though all the other people in this room exhibit similar behavior, isn't it a leap in logic to think that their outward behavior represents the same kind of relationship that yours does to your outward behavior? Related to this is this thought experiment that was raised called philosophical zombies, or P-zombies. Your friends and family members, they're all engaging in the same kind of behaviors that you are. Right? When they taste the ice cream, they're like, ooh, right? When they put their hand on the hot stove, they're like, oh, and they pull their hand away. How do you know that they are actually conscious? Especially now in this world in which AI is emerging and seems to exhibit this same kind of communicational patterns that humans do. That's what you're observing from these AI agents, right? These LLMs. Would you say that those are conscious? Some of you might, right? Some of you might think it's past some sort of threshold. But the basic relation is the same. The point is the same. We can only see into our own minds. We can only know what things seem like and what things feel like from our perspective. other people's experiences might be completely different. They might not have any conscious experience whatsoever. How could we ever know or prove that? Questions like these might lead us into skepticism, that other people are like us, that other people have minds. Now, the other response that he considers to this question is, well, look, there might be a few little differences in how we see and experience the world, but if there were drastic differences, we'd be able to tell, because their behavior would be radically different than ours. Right? But no, we all behave in a similar way. There seems to be this correlation that since their behavior is similar to mine, well, they probably have similar experiences that I do. Right? When your friend bites into a lemon, do they go, so good? No, what do? Right? Because it's sour. And you're like, okay, yeah, They also taste the lemon as sour. They're similar to me, right? This response doesn't work either, Nagel thinks, or it's not a very good one. Because again, it's presuming a correlation between what we see as their behavior and what's actually going on inside of their minds. We can only have certainty about the relationship between our behavior and our experiences, because we have special access to our experiences, our feelings, our thoughts. So this leaves us with some questions. First, how do we know that others are conscious? Maybe everyone around you is a philosophical zombie. They don't actually have a consciousness at all. Similarly, how do we know there are other minds that exist at all besides our own? All we have to go on, it seems, is the outward behavior of people. What they say, how they react to things, how they respond to things. But there's a gap, right, between their outward behavior and what's actually going on the inside. Finally, it raises questions of consciousness itself. If there is this gap, right, and we can only know what our experience is, we can only know what the world seems like to us, because we have special access, special privilege to our own thoughts and feelings. What should that lead us to think about the nature of consciousness? Plants don't seem conscious, really, right? They don't engage in the exact same behaviors that we humans do. But maybe they are. Maybe plants feel pain like we do. How about computers, right? These large language models. They seem to be exhibiting behavior that humans exhibit, right? Communication, all of these things, using pronouns like I, blah, blah, blah. Maybe they're conscious. Maybe they can be conscious too. How would we know that? We can't see inside the plant or inside the computer like we can see into ourselves, right? So as we go through class today, just kind of keep these questions in mind, because they're lurking in the background here. Questions like these are ones that philosophers, some, are trying to answer, but they're extremely difficult to answer. Okay. That's basically chapter 3. I wanted to get through that so that we can talk about the actual interesting stuff. Chapter 4, which goes over the mind-body problem. Any questions about this? Yeah?
I feel like those questions kind of just raise even more for me. It's like,
They should.
oh, it's just so frustrating because I wish there was like just an answer for it. But
Well, presumably there is an answer, right? And we're trying to find it, but
I just
it's
feel like we're going in circles.
it's hard, right, to determine an answer.
Say we are the only, like there are no other conscious minds and we're the only one.
Like you yourself are the only one?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Isn't that solipsism?
Yes.
Right. Does that mean that you were like born with the same level of I don't know how to phrase it, like knowledge that you have now, but you were just holding back as a child? 'Cause it's like, how do
That's
you
an interesting idea.
like,
Right? Yeah, no, I see where you're going with this. It's like, if I'm the only mind that exists, right, doesn't that seem to imply something like, well, all people I see out there in the world are just like something I'm making up, right? Something my mind is doing. It seems like they're telling me things. It seems like I'm being educated when I go to school and I watch the news and I learn about things. But if you are the only mind that exists, yeah, maybe that implies you do know everything, but you don't know that you know it or something. Yeah. It's a strange thing, right? For this reason and others, though, people are like, solipsism, you don't have to worry about that because it just seems untenable. What do you think?
I don't know.
Doesn't seem like there's a way we can prove there are other minds, like we can do a mathematical proof. But it certainly seems like you are all conscious out there, to me, right? You seem different. You seem to have experiences. Maybe you don't think that's a good enough justification, though, for thinking there are other minds outside of your own. So maybe if you're being philosophically rigorous and consistent, maybe solipsism is the only justifiable position. I don't think so because it raises problems like the one you mentioned. It seems like we learn, right? It seems like our minds change. But yeah, it's a tough question, right? Okay, let's go on to chapter 4 here. I'd like to start by having y'all talk in your groups a little bit again. Discuss this amongst yourselves. What do you think the relationship is between your mind and your brain? Are they the same thing? Are they different things? Are they made up of the same underlying substance or material? What's going on there? Okay, chat about it. What do you think, Noah?
I think they
You said how they're different?
Are they the same? Are they different? What's the relationship between them?
Different. I think like the mind.
Okay.
Like thinking. Like
Yeah.
executing. I think the brain is more like storage. You know
Okay.
what I mean? And the mind like takes out of it.
Okay. Do you think they're both made up of particles and matter?
Yeah, I'll probably say so. And I don't know. Honestly, don't know.
It's a tough question, right?
Like the brain part, yeah, but the mind part, I always thought that was so cool. You know what I mean? But like that's being in here, I don't think so. I just don't pinpoint. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Do you think our thoughts and feelings, everything going on in our mind, can be explained just through physics and chemistry and biology?
I don't think so.
Okay.
I think
It seems like then you think it's something different than like a table or a chair. Because we could explain all of this just with physical equations, right?
yeah.
But I mean, what you feel when your girlfriend hugs you, could we explain that? Like we could explain a chair? Okay.
You can't explain like feelings, right?
They don't, you're saying they don't seem to be, we can't capture them with like physics equations or chemical reaction equations. Okay. All right. What do y'all think back here? Yeah, do you want to move back so you can chat with these guys? What do y'all think? What's the relationship?
I don't know. This chapter was a little confusing for me at first. It was like all over the place.
Yeah.
But, like almost like questioning like mind, body, and spirit. And,
Yeah.
like, souls and stuff. Like, how
For
do we
sure.
prove that? How do we prove we have souls?
It's a good question.
But like, so I was telling her because I wrote down a question about like science in general. So,
Yeah.
like, if we're questioning like our consciousness, does science have any grounding whatsoever?
Well, one thing that we're going to say, which I'll put on the board first, is it seems like physical things affect our minds. Like if I hit you really hard in the back of the head, it's lights out, right? Or if you get really drunk, right? And then you're like, your experience is different, right? Not just in your body. So maybe, you know, they're connected in some way, the mind and the brain. But people are going to be split on whether or not they think they're the same thing and these different points. So, huh?
There's no answer, right?
I think everybody thinks there's an answer. The difficulty is finding the answer.
But there is none. Because that's what philosophy is, right? Open.
No, there's not like mathematical proofs. But philosophers wouldn't be working on any of this if they didn't think there was an answer.
Okay.
Yeah.
So they're trying to find an answer.
Yes,
Okay.
yeah. We're all trying, as philosophers, we're all trying to find the answer, but it's really hard,
Yeah.
as I'm sure you're noticing. Okay. What do y'all think? What's the relationship, do you think, between the mind and the brain? Let's shelve the skepticism for now. Let's assume, you know, consciousness exists, the external world exists. What the heck is going on with the mind and the brain? How are they related?
I mean, shelving skepticism allows me to believe it's more physical, the physicist or physicalist view of it, because
Okay, yeah, why do you say that?
if the external world exists and people are conscious, then everyone has the framework of a mind, right? Which,
Seems like it.
yeah, at least from my point of view, that would come from like evolving to consciousness, so we all have the same framework.
Evolving to consciousness. Wait, say more about that.
Our brains developed enough to get to this level of consciousness,
Okay.
which in the reading it was like coal and diamonds are the same. We just need to figure out how they were arranged. And I think it's pretty similar to the brain.
Okay, so you kind of have this feel.
Mm-hmm.
You think that the mind and the brain are the same, basically. Like we could explain mental processes through biological and chemical reactions and physics equations and stuff like that by talking about particles and waves. And you also add an evolutionary explanation, right? It seems like we've evolved to have this mind, right? Through millions of years of adaptation, natural selection. Okay. That is one common view. Yes. Basically, the materialists or the physicalists think that the mind and the brain are the same thing. When we're talking about the mind, we're just talking about the brain. In other words, the mind is reducible to the brain. We can describe it with all of the stuff that we're using in science, like how we would talk about a brain. There are certain biological and chemical reactions, neurotransmitters, electricity, physics equations, right? Our brain is subject to the laws of physics. Blah, blah, blah. Yes, this is a very common view. Anybody else might subscribe to this view? Why do you think this view is right? What leads you to think that?
Well, also within the brain, we can see like chemicals like dopamine, oxytocin, serotonin. Although you can't explain the whole process of reaching that emotion or that experience, but you can see that through those things, we've had a lot of desires and a lot of experience as well. And I think that a lot of the purpose of the brain is for survival, and we don't take that into account when talking about the mind.
So you brought up like we can see dopamine and stuff, right? We can do fMRI scans. And we can see areas of the brain lighting up, right? And we know that if I opened your skull and I shoved a rod in there, you'd become a different person, right? If I gave you a lobotomy, it seems like, right, the mind and the brain are connected, right? When we mess with the brain, the mind becomes affected by that, right? If I hit you really hard on the back of the head with a baseball bat, it's lights out, right? So, through our observation of the world, through the practice of science, we started to understand better the relationship here between the mind and the brain. First, as I was just noting, our conscious experience and our consciousness is influenced by what happens to our brain and our body, right? If we mess with your brain, the way you experience the world changes, right? I mess with your body in some way. That causes you to have an experience in your mind. So there's some kind of relationship between these two things. If you stub your toe, right, what's going to happen? What are you going to feel? Pain, right? Something physically happening to your body seems to influence how you're feeling and what you're thinking, right? You'll be feeling pain and you'll be thinking, what the fuck? Right? So consciousness seems to be influenced by what happens to our bodies and our brains. Second, which is a slightly different point, it seems conscious experience requires brain activity. When we see that people no longer have any brain activity, we pronounce them as dead. And they're not responding to the world, it seems, or reacting to what's going on around them. So we think they're gone, right? Their mind's not there. in some instances, it seems, we've got a pretty good handle on what happens to somebody's experience, consciousness, when we mess with a certain part of their brain. Right? This is why we did lobotomies for a while. We knew reliably how messing with a certain part of the brain made them into effectively a zombie, right? Who was very obedient and blah, blah, blah. So, on the basis of this stuff, you might hold this view. That, look, the mind is just the brain. There's no distinction between them. We could describe all your hopes, feelings, desires, experiences by talking about physics, biology, and chemistry. We could quantify it. We don't have the complete knowledge. Science doesn't have the complete knowledge of consciousness yet, but it's working on it, right? What do y'all think of this view? Seem right? Seem wrong? Yeah.
Imagine how much of a blow it would be if science just figures out the brain. To like.
How much of a blow it would be to who to philosophy, or maybe to people who, practice a certain religion?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Does anybody think this view is wrong? You can speak up. I think this view is wrong. Yes?
So I don't per se think it's like completely wrong, but I think it's partially wrong. Like
Say more. Why do you think it's partially wrong?
there's more aspects to the brain that just science can't really explain, right? So like images, I guess.
Okay.
When you dream, right, with the subconscious, we haven't really done much study about that, so we don't know what basically causes it, why you dream certain dreams, and that goes into the dual aspect part that it was talking about, where it's like two sides of the same coin.
Okay. You're raising another view in the philosophy of mind here, right? One that is also very common. Let's call this one dualism. And we're going to break dualism down a lot further because there are a lot of different types of it. It's the view that mental states and processes are fundamentally distinct from what's going on in the brain. They're connected, they're related, a lot of dualists will say, but these are two different things. René Descartes is famous for this view. He said, yes, there's a relationship between your body and your mind, or between your brain and your mind, but they're fundamentally different things. Your body and your brain are made up of particles and waves and physical energy, matter. But your mind is made up of something completely different. Mental stuff, or soul stuff, which is immaterial. It's not like a table or a chair. It's made of a different substance. So we can't reduce the mind to the brain. We can't explain your entire experience and what's going on by invoking biology, chemistry, and physics. What do y'all think of this view? Yeah?
I feel like the big thing behind it for a lot of people is what you said earlier, where like, if you cut open the brain, and no matter how closely you look, you won't find the mind and how people feel. But I feel like if someone really wanted to like fight for physicalism, they could say we just haven't gotten to the point where we can do that, but it might be a process that can only unfold in a way that's unobserved, and that's why some people like abstract it to the soul and stuff that can't be understood.
Yeah. I mean, you might say in response to this view, look, science hasn't come up with the complete theory yet, but just give it some time, right? Neuroscience and psychology and physics will get us there, right? What do y'all think about that? You think science will be able to explain the mind fully someday?
Maybe.
Maybe. Yeah, you're like maybe.
Yeah, I mean, before it didn't seem like a possibility, before as in like literally 5 years ago.
Mm.
But now with AI and just how quickly things are ramping up, almost like a snowball.
Yeah.
Quantum computing coming into.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna say that it would be for sure possible, but it definitely opens it up a bit to at least try, maybe get it.
Yeah. 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 I mean, science has been hugely successful. Look at everything it allows us to do. We can fly through the sky in giant metal containers that like defy gravity because we figured out wind physics. We all have a supercomputer in our pockets now. Yeah.
I think if you're a big dualist and you say, we're never going to figure it out, I think you're cutting yourself off from a lot of potential science.
Okay. Yeah.
And you sort of inhibit your opportunity to do research and find something.
Yeah, maybe you think it's unjustified to be like, science will never be able to explain it. You're like, that's a leap. Right? Yeah. How else might you object to this dualist view? Or the physicalist view? If you fall into one of these camps, what do you have against the other one that you think is off and is wrong? Some people have said some things already, but I know you're all tired. Here, I'll help you out. Okay, I'll start you off. Here's one thing you might say to the materialist or physicalist view. Analyzing brain processes doesn't get at experience. Somebody mentioned it earlier. If we cut open Lexi's brain and we're, looking around and we're running tests with our fancy scientific experiments, will we ever figure out what an apple tasted like to her? I see a lot of people shaking their heads. If you don't think that the scientific explanation can get at that stuff, like what this shirt looks like to you, what it feels like when your girlfriend hugs you after you haven't seen her for a while, the passion, the emotion. If you don't think science can really explain that stuff, doesn't get at that stuff, well, you might reject this view. Similarly, there was a thought experiment along these same lines called Mary's Room. Has anybody ever heard of this thought experiment? Okay, imagine there's a girl named Mary. She has lived her entire life in a small room with a black and white TV. She's never been allowed to leave, and the room is only painted white and black. There are no other colors in the room. As it turns out, the people who locked Mary up told her, "You're going to become an expert in everything relating to the perception of the color red. Here are your neuroscience books printed in black and white, no color. So you can learn about what happens neuroscientifically with the color red and what regions of the brain light up when you see the color red. Here's a physics book on wavelengths and frequencies. Here's an anatomy book on rods and cones in your retina." Mary becomes an expert in color perception, but she's never seen a color. she's allowed to leave the room and she sees the color red for the first time, will she come to know? Will she learn something new or not? A lot of people are like, yeah, she'll obviously learn something new. And if she does, if she knows something that she didn't know before after having become an expert in color perception, all the physics, the chemistry, the anatomy, that tells us we can't explain mental stuff just through physical description and the sciences and physical processes. The word that's used to refer to these kinds of things, like the perception of red, your feeling of the ground beneath your feet without your socks on. In the literature, it's called qualia. Things have qualities to them. You sense and experience qualities of things. Texture, roughness, color, smoothness, temperature, blah, blah, blah. Okay. Let's turn to the dualist view. Take 2 minutes. Talk to the people around you. What rebuttals do you think someone might have to dualism? That no, the mind and the brain are different. What would you say to them to be like, you're wrong about that? Here's this, this, and that. Okay, go ahead. All right, what do you guys think back here? What do you think are some objections to dualism?
We were talking about Mary. I think if you were to have a computer instead of Mary, and
Yeah.
you fed a computer a bunch of information about like the frequency of red, I think it could generate red. So
Okay.
That's some.
Yeah, so maybe you think Mary's room doesn't work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But like if you had a computer instead, then you could create red from like first principles or whatever.
Okay.
I think. So it's kind of.
Yeah, any other ideas? I mean, what does dualism sound like to you? Doesn't it sound like it's saying we have a body and we have a soul, man? That's our mind. Is that a good view? Is that a justifiable view? Maybe? Yeah, I mean, if the mind is not a material thing, where did it come from? What is it? Why do we have it? Like, those are all questions that it'll have to answer, right?
Justification for that. It's a pretty extreme thing to say that there's like a soul. You got
Yeah.
to back that up somewhat.
Yeah. Maybe you don't think they have any good explanations for that, you know? Because people who talk about the mind in this way, it seems like they're talking about something like a soul. And you might just think, there are no souls, bro. You know, like, what are you talking? Can you measure a soul? Can you see a soul? Can you taste a soul? Or can you taste a mind? Can't see a mind. Can't measure a mind. So,
Yeah, science. There's no basis for that science. It's kind of like a,
right.
You just
Yeah.
gotta trust me that there's a soul.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. What do y'all think? Is this a tenable view, or do you have some objections to it? Yeah.
I'll just throw this in there. Maybe at least something reviews is evolution. Like when we're born, we don't come fully. Our brain is not fully developed. At what point does the soul part come into this whole equation that we're coming up with?
Right. Yeah, you brought up the word soul, right? Doesn't this view kind of seem like something like a soul is being invoked? Descartes, for example, famously argued that, look, your brain and your body made up of physical stuff, matter. Your mind is an immaterial thing. It's not made up of physical stuff and matter. What would science say about that? Can science measure an immaterial, soul-like thing?
Well, but if they're fully distinct, we can at least measure a correlation between the brain and the mind through stuff like dementia or things that eat away at the brain.
Yeah.
Have a direct result on your mental capacity.
Yeah. So it seems like science can, again, tell us a lot of things about the mind and its relationship to the brain.
It's like a
right?
framework to work in.
Yeah. But when it comes to positing that you have this mind or soul-like thing, I mean, isn't that just kind of like not backed up by science at all? And with the evidence in neuroscience and this stuff, it seems like, no, we'll be able to explain all of that. Like positing the existence of this soul-like thing that's immaterial, that everybody has, but you can't see it, you can't touch it, can't measure it. Isn't that just like, come on, man? You might think, look, with how successful science has been, all these things it's done for us, it is not supported. This view is not supported by what we know about how the world works. Okay? That's one response you might have. Similarly, this view, dualism, requires you to posit the existence of an immaterial thing in addition to everything else. In addition to all the scientific facts that we know of how the world works and all that. So you might think, look, like materialism is a more parsimonious explanation. You don't need to posit the existence of this thing that you can't see or touch or taste. And if you can explain the world without reference to that thing, why would you believe in or reference it at all? Yes, materialism has less assumptions. You might think, like thinking there's this soul, mind thing, that's an assumption that you don't need in order to explain the world. And we should prefer explanations that have the least amount of assumptions. Seems rational, right? Now, for some of these reasons and others, people have come up with a bunch of other kind of dualistic-like views to account for these problems. Okay? One of them is epiphenomenalism. This is the view that mental stuff emerge from physical stuff, perhaps evolutionarily. But there's no causal relationship between them. In other words, it rejects this idea that the mind causes body stuff to happen and the body causes mind stuff to happen. It's almost as if, according to epiphenomenalism, we have our mental life on one line and we have our physical life on another line, and what happens in the body and the brain affects what happens in the body and the brain, but what's going on in the mind is just these two never meet. It's like there's a movie playing in your head and the stuff that's happening in your brain and your body is completely different. They never impact or influence each other. What do you think of this view? See you shaking your head. Why? Why are you shaking your head?
Well, just from if it's like a not related, then you have no control over your body. Like, are you
well, no, you still have a brain.
So the brain is controlling yourself, but you're like examining what you're doing through your mental.
Yeah. Yeah, you have your mental life, but it has no impact on your physical body or your brain. It's just like there's a movie playing and your brain and body are just doing brain and body stuff.
Like no correlation.
There's a correlation, but no causation.
Oh, cause, okay.
Yeah. Because look, like the movie that's going on in your head, right, it seems to be correlated with the physical stuff that's happening out here. But what's going on in your head is not causing anything in your body or brain to happen. And what's going on in your body and your brain isn't causing anything in your mind to happen. Is this a weird view?
Mm-hmm.
Why is this a weird view?
Because it's like wrong both ways.
Say more about that.
Your brain can affect your mental, like you were saying, a lobotomy is going to change your mental mind state, and if you're watching a movie and it releases like dopamine throughout your brain, it is going to affect your physical.
That's the first rebuttal to it. Yeah, there seems to be a causal relationship between your mind and your brain. If I smack your brain really hard, if I take a scoop of it out with an ice cream scooper, your movie is going to be way different, right? Maybe you won't have any movie at all anymore. There seems to be a relationship between these. Duh. But there's another problem. And this one's a little more philosophically complex and interesting. How the hell does a movie, a mental movie, perceptions and feelings, emerge from physical stuff? This is immaterial, this is material. How the hell does that work? Do we have any other example of physical stuff being arranged in a certain way and giving rise to something that's not physical? Doesn't seem like we have another example of that, right? So this is really fucking weird. How does this happen? What's going on here? This is called the problem of emergence.
Well, also, if it emerged from something physical, it would have a cause or reason why it would be important. So doesn't that, like, it would serve a purpose?
You might think even in saying there's emergence, they're like sneaking in a causal, story that their own theory denies. Maybe. I'm not an expert on epiphenomenalism, though, so I'm not going to criticize them on that because I don't know it all. Okay, so there's that view. Let's look at another dualist view. This is the one that y'all have been talking about all day. What do you think this view says? Interactionism. What word do you see in here? Interaction. The mind and the brain do interact. They do cause stuff to happen to each other. There is a relationship there. And it's also, again, going to say that our mind emerges from some complex arrangement of matter. Like our mind, consciousness emerges from when physical arrangements of particles get complex enough and they're arranged in a certain way, like evolutionarily. Of course, this view is also saddled with this problem of emergence. We can draw up a nice scientific story of evolution, but how the heck does an immaterial thing emerge out of a physical arrangement of particles? How does that happen? Why does that happen? What's going on there? We know what it's like for two physical things to interact. Right? There was a collision there. Because a physical thing hit another physical thing, and a transfer of energy. Some of that energy was lost due to vibration that produced sound that our ears picked up. Right? Billiard balls, they can collide because they're both physical. The other problem is, what? How does an immaterial thing causally interact with a material thing? How does your immaterial mind impact your physical brain, your physical body? How does that work? We know what it's like for physical things to interact. How does an immaterial thing interact? How? So this is also the problem of interaction. You got to tell a good story about that, how that could be true, how that happens. It seems intuitive that they interact, but how the heck does that work? Because your mind interacting with your body is not, it can't be the same thing as like a fist in the table or billiard balls, because they're made of two different things. Finally, we have the weirdest views. My favorites. How do you get around this problem of emergence? Well, what if you just pause it? The mental stuff was already in the physical stuff all along. There's little mentally bits in all physical things. It's only that consciousness emerges when you get enough mentally bits arranged in a certain way. This is called elementalism. It's not saying that chairs and tables are conscious, but they have the stuff, they have the building blocks of consciousness within them. Even atoms. Atoms have the building blocks of consciousness within them. Mentally bits. I'll say stuff. Mental stuff are fundamental properties of our physical reality. But not emergent in the same way that an interactionist view or an epiphenomenalist view might be, because the mentally bits are already in all the physical stuff. That has mentally bits, this has mentally bits, this has mentally bits. But what the heck are mentally bits? What does that look like? Can we measure them? What's going on there? That's a problem. Right? Mentally bits, are you high? Did you smoke a bowl and then come up with some wacko philosophy of mind theory? Does anybody have any idea what the last view could be?
That all things are
Yes. Finally, we have idealism. It's the view that everything in reality is fundamentally mental. It's not physical. All that exists in the world are minds and ideas. This thing you call matter, have you ever tasted matter, Lexi? The stuff that makes everything else up, matter. Have you seen matter, Anthony?
I hope so.
I mean, you see chairs, right? Matter, according to Berkeley, a famous idealist, is just a mental abstraction. The only thing we can be sure that exists are minds and ideas. Minds and ideas are the only way we learn about the world. They're the only way we interact with the world. This, Berkeley would say, is an idea. It doesn't mean that it doesn't exist external to us. It does. It doesn't mean that this doesn't have its own reality, existence. It does. It's not a hallucination. It's just not made of the stuff you thought it was made of. Everything that you see around you are just minds and ideas. All right, what do you think of this view before you go? Crazy? Insane? Cool?
It's, I don't know, more interesting than dualism. More easier to believe, funny enough.
Okay, yeah.
I was gonna say these don't seem like sober thoughts.
They don't seem like sober thoughts? Well, all of these views were formulated to respond to problems.
At least I
You know?
that one just seems like I don't know.
Let me blow your mind a little bit before you go. What have we figured out about physics in the 20th century? Perceiving an experiment changes it. Just the act of perceiving it. This is what we know. This is a fundamental view in quantum physics. If you want to get more into it, perception collapses the wave function. It makes something have a definite place, a definite location.
Electrons, observe them when they're just in an actual place.
The double slit experiment, yeah. Yeah, depending on how the film was arranged and all this, they might exhibit the properties of a particle or a wave, but when you look at it, it exhibits the properties of a particle. It's similar, yeah.
I just need the attendance sheet.
All right. Go bug your friends with these crazy views, okay? Ask them, what is the mind, bro? What's going on?